All right, guys, let's talk about a World War II film taking place in London, directed by Steve McQueen. Let's talk about it. What's going on, everyone? Welcome to Movie Emporium's Apple TV Plus original movie review of Blitz, the newest film from director Steve McQueen. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, here we have a new film from Steve McQueen, the director of 12 Years a Slave. This movie is an interesting one because it is a story of a woman, a mother, who's played by Saoirse Ronan, who has to basically raise her kid, who's about 8 or 9 years old at this point, in the middle of the Blitz Krieg that was taking place in London during World War II, where every night for about 8 months, the city was being bombarded by bombs from the Luftwaffe, of course, the German army. And so what this story does and what it kind of pertains is, as George, who is played by Elliott Heffernan, is sent off to a school to be safe during the war, he decides he doesn't want to do that, so he escapes from a train and he goes on a quest to find his mother, which leads him into some really interesting predicaments as he tries to get back home to London, where his mom is currently, helping with the war efforts and having to deal with the, the idea, the fact that her son is a black individual, so therefore she has to deal with racism. It's basically what Steve McQueen is notoriously known for doing, which is taking real hard subject matters and kind of putting in this really interesting idea of a situation and so on and so forth. So kind of with that said, Blitz is a movie I've been kind of wanting to see because Steve McQueen is such an interesting director. He's a guy that just really kind of takes chances on his movies, whether it be Shame or 12 Years a Slave. He has a really interesting knack of putting his characters in these really kind of dour, really sad, but really kind of interesting ideas of what humanity is like and how humanity treats people of different races and creeds and stuff like that. So a movie like this, dealing with a kid who has interracial parents, who is dealing with racism in the World War II. It's right up his alley, to be fairly honest. 12 Years a Slave was 100% about that. The idea of like slaves and the torture that they went through and stuff like that. And here it's set during the Blitz, which of course happened in World War II in London, which killed like 40,000 people. So, with it releasing finally on Apple TV Plus, it hasn't garnered the greatest of critical acclaim like I would hope it would, because it looked like such an interesting film. I've heard some really good reviews from people that have talked about how good Saoirse Ronan is and how good, of course, Elliott Heffernan are and how strong their performances are. But the question has to be remaining, is it worth watching? Is it an interesting movie? And I would say yes, it's an interesting movie. It's not a completely successful attempt. It actually wraps up a little too easily. But I think the performances from the two individuals, George and George's mother, Rita, are so strong in this movie, are so well put together and so interesting that it actually lifts the movie from being very rote and kind of by the book. It's a very much a story about a kid in this like a really difficult situation, having to get back to his mom, and the mom having to try and find her kid and stuff like that. It's been done a billion times before, but what makes this movie so unique is how good those performances are. This is, it's been talked about how Saoirse Ronan is going to get an Oscar nomination for this role, or the outrun, depending on however you look at it. But she is always good in everything she does, and she's no different here. She's very talented. She is very hard-hitting when it comes to the motherly role. There's a lot of flashbacks in this movie that really kind of signify like how she is dealing with like the racial scenario where she fell in love with this guy who was black, and once again they have a son. And the father was I won't spoil it, but there's something that happens to the father, and at least I think that's what's happened. There's a little bit of confusion what actually happens in this movie because it goes all over the place. But the kid who comes across so many different types of individuals really is the central focus of like how different people truly are and how different people act. He comes across this, this soldier who's from Africa, and then he comes across these crime individuals, and he comes across the different people in the tunnel systems when they were down there when the bombs were going off. There's a lot of heavy lifting that this kid has to do, and a lot of interactions which are very I mean, it could be very fantastical, but it's what Steve McQueen does is bring it back into like true realism. And the simple fact that like this kid goes through so many different things that he's going to be changed from the moment whenever he reaches his mom, or if he reaches his mom. And it's a really interesting way to, you know, tell a story, to be fairly honest, because you don't see a lot of times. Most of the times it's kids having to deal with scenarios where they're stuck in a home, or they're stuck, you know, in a bad situation, like a you know, once again, a home or something like that. But here this kid's going through so many different scenarios. They're having to deal with the war and, you know, all that kind of nonsense. And then, you know, on top of everything, the mother, Rita, has to deal with her home life, and then has to deal with her father, and then has to deal with, like, you know, trying to keep the war effort going on, trying to, you know, help kids out. And it becomes one thing after another. And I think it can be too much for people, because it's like in that aspect of like Angela's Ashes or something like that, where the subject matter at hand is so difficult to watch, but it's portrayed in such a way of humility that I found it kind of very cathartic in a lot of respects. This movie is just beautiful to look at. It's gorgeous to watch. I think there's probably some of the most arresting things I've seen this year when it comes to, you know, stuff like if you've ever seen 1917, or, you know, any type of war movie like Schindler's List. There's shots in here, especially that involve the kid, where you are almost in shock and awe, just kind of what he's having to go through, and how just like demanding on, you know, there's like explosions when the kid's running around, and there's bombs going off, and there's people trying to put him in scenarios where he's trying to steal from dead people. And it really is arresting when you watch it. You feel so bad for this kid. And I think that's what Steve McQueen's whole purpose for this movie is just to create a scenario where this kid gets a real life look into the problems of this world. And it's really interesting to see. And we also get a look into how difficult a war can be, especially in something like what happened with the Blitz, where World War II in London really was devastating and almost kind of took people down. But there was hope, and there was, you know, reasoning, and the people were trying to. There's a point in this movie where, you know, there's a puppeteer, and they're, you know, having fun with the kids, and there's a way trying to keep it normal while also having to stay safe when the bombs are going off. And it leads to a really interesting conclusion, whether you like it or not. It leads to an interesting conclusion, which I wasn't really expecting, but kind of makes a lot of sense in the kind of the war torn efforts of what happens. But I think it's a really well done movie. It's not a perfect movie. It probably won't make my top 10, but I think the performances of the two are really well done. I think the performances of like the supporting characters, whether it be Stephen Graham or Harrison Dixon, are fine. They feel a little one note. They feel a little goofy. There's not really much there when it comes to substance. Stephen Graham's playing a really slimy guy in this, you know, crime outfit or whatever. It just doesn't really work for me, to be fairly honest. And it's really cool to see the musician Peter Weller in this movie too. I thought it was kind of fun. But I think in the end, I still recommend this movie. It's a difficult movie to watch, but so are most of Steve McQueen's movies. The underground stuff that he did as a TV series, the, you know, 12 Years a Slave. You know, it's the humanity that he really likes to reach into, and it's never that easy when it's like dealing with like subject matter like racism and, like, you know, slavery and the bombs of World War II and the Blitz, and it's not easy subject matter. It really isn't. So I give a lot of praise to the cast and crew of this movie. I give a lot of praise to Steve McQueen for at least attempting to make a really kind of hard-hitting film. Sometimes it doesn't completely work. I think sometimes characters get left by the wayside, and I think it's not a perfect movie. I think it is a little longer than it needs to be, but I think the two main characters, the young kid and Saoirse Ronan, really uplift this movie into a different sphere than what it could have been. Because if it had not focused on them two individuals, I think it wouldn't have worked, to be fairly honest. So overall, I enjoyed the movie. It's not the most uplifting movie of the year. It has great music by Hans Zimmer, but it's a good movie by Steve McQueen. It's not his best, but it's still a good, entertaining movie. So there you go. But with that said, that is my take on Blitz, which will be on Apple TV Plus. So go check it out if you have Apple TV Plus. But with that said, thank you so much for watching. Comments below. What did you think of this movie if you watched it? Are you looking forward to it? Let me know why. Otherwise, if you like what you see on this channel, hit the subscribe button to join Movie Emporium. Hit that notification bell at the top to find what's coming next. If you like this video, awesome. Hit that like button. And as always, we'll see you guys on the next video. Peace out, guys.